Okay, this is the easiest way to play every scale. We're going to start with the pentatonics, and we're going to start by finding a root note for the key. So, for example, here's the 5th fret A on the first string. You can go up 5 frets from there, not including that fret. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go to the 2nd string, and you have the same note. Then go up 4 frets from there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and go to the 3rd string. You have the same note, and then go up 3 frets from there. 1, 2, 3. And you've got the same note again, which is an octave higher from where we started. So you can go backwards the same way. You can start here, go down 3 frets, go down 4 frets, and then go down 5 frets. So the way those notes again are found are start on the first string, go 5 frets, then go to the next string, 4 frets, then go back to the first string, 3 frets. So it's 5, 4, and 3, or backwards 3, 4, and 5. You can do it on any note. Here's a G, 3rd fret. Go up 5 frets, then 4 frets, and then 3 frets, and then 5 frets again, or go backwards, 5 frets here, then 3 frets here, 4 frets here, 5 frets here, and then 3 frets there, and you've got all the same notes. So use those notes to find all of the scales in every position. So let's start in the key of A. If you put your pinky finger on a root note, anywhere you find a root note, you'll get this repeating pattern to make the major pentatonic scale. There are 2 pentatonic scales, major and minor. This is the major. You start with your pinky on the root note, and then you do 2 wide patterns. So if your pinky's on A, we're playing A major pentatonic. You go down, you play 2 wide patterns. Okay, so the next thing after the wide patterns is always 2 wide patterns, then 3 narrow patterns. So these ring finger patterns. And after that, there's always going to be 2 more wide patterns. If we had more strings here, you'd have 2 wide patterns there, then 3 more narrows. So it's always the pinky wide ones, and the narrow ring ones, 3 of them, and then back to 2 wides, 3 narrows. So it's 2 wides, 3 narrows, and then back to 2 wides. So that's if you start with your pinky finger on the root note, you're playing major pentatonic. 2 wides, 3 narrows, 2 wides, and so on. If you start with your pointer finger on that same note, you start with the narrows. So you put your pointer finger here and you do 3 ring finger patterns. And you do 2 wides, and then you go back to the narrows. If we had more strings, we'd have 3 narrows there. And we do the same thing on every string. So there's our A, go up 5 frets on the 2nd string, put your pinky on it, and you start again with 2 wides. So 2 pinkies. And then you go to 3 narrows. And if you had more strings there, you'd have 2 more wides. So no matter where you are in the wides or narrows, you're always going to do 2 wides, then 3 narrows, then 2 wides and 3 narrows, whether you're going up or down. So here we started on the wides with our pinky on the root note there. Then we went to 3 narrows. Put that back up. Here's our 3 narrows, 2 wides, and after that we go back to 3 narrows. If we had more strings this way, we'd have 3 narrows that way. That's with the pinky on the root note again on that A. If you do the same thing we did down here, you put your pointer finger on the root note, you're going to be in the narrows to start out. So we're going to have 3 narrows, and then 2 wides, and then we'd have 3 more narrows if we had more strings. So again, pointer fingers on this root note on the 2nd string, same note as there. We have 3 narrows, 2 wides, and you can go back up. Here's our 3 narrows. The next thing we have is then 2 wides. Here's our 3 narrows. We start with the narrows if you have your pointer finger on the root. Then you go to 2 wides. You go back up. Here's our 2 wides. Here's our 3 narrows. And then back on the next string, it would go back to wides again because we did 3 narrows, then 2 wides, then 3 narrows and 2 wides. It's always that same rotation of narrows and wides. We call these the rotating patterns. So if we do that same thing, we found the note here, now we find the note here, which is what we just did. We put our pinky and then we put our pointer finger there. And if we go to the next note, 4 frets up from there, we can put our pinky on that A and 2 wides, and we go to 3 narrows. If we had another string there, it would be 3 narrows. So going back up, here's our narrows, here's our 2 wides, then we go to 3 narrows again. And if we had another string there, we'd have narrows. And if you know the positions, you know that's the 5th position. Now if we put our pointer finger on that same note, on the 3rd string, that's at the 14th fret, we do the same thing we did for the other scales. We have 3 narrows starting on that pointer finger. Then we have 2 wides. If we had more strings down there, we'd have another wide, and then 3 narrows, and so on. So here's our 3 narrows, 2 wides, 3 narrows. That's the rotating pattern. So if we're going down, we have the 3 narrows, and we go back up, 3 narrows. Now we have 2 wides on the top 2 strings. You'll notice that again your pinky note is back on that root note and octave higher. And we could do the same thing we did before, pinky on the wides, then pointer finger on the narrows, and so on. And we can put our pointer finger on that, and it's the same, 3 narrows, 2 wides, 3 narrows, 2 wides. For every single scale, if you put your pinky on the root note to play a major pentatonic, you have 2 wides and then 3 narrows. If you put your pointer finger on the root note, you're going to have 3 narrows and then 2 wides. Now, something you'll see as I'm doing this is that I have some shifts in there. There are 2 places where you'll shift. Whenever you're moving between the 2nd and 3rd strings, you're going to shift down when you're going to the 3rd string, when you're shifting down from 2nd to 3rd, and you're going to go up the opposite way. When you're going from 3rd to 2nd, you're going to shift up. So if you look at this, if I put my pointer finger on the A here, and I do my narrows, my 3 narrows, when I get to the 3rd string, I need to shift down a fret. So there's my 2 narrows. My 3rd narrow is going to be down a fret. If I do that same thing up here, I have, there's my first narrow with my pointer finger on the root. I have to shift down when I go to the 3rd string. So wherever you see a 3rd string, if I start, for example, with pinky on that root note, remember the same scale can be played with 2 wides. When you put your pinky on the root note, shift down a fret when you get to the 3rd string. The other shift happens when you're going from the wides to the narrows. So we just did, for example, 2 wides. Shifted down on the 3rd string. Now, when the wides are stacked beneath, or when the narrows are stacked on top of the wides. So for example, I have 2 wides here, then I have 3 narrows. Whenever those narrows are stacked on top of the wides, like you just saw, there's 2 wides here, and then stacked on top of that, physically on top of the wides, you need to shift a fret up, like this, to get back to the narrows. There's always a shift when going from the wides to the narrows. So if we do this here, for example, here's our pointer finger on the root. We get 3 narrows, shift down on the 3rd string, then we have 2 wides. Then when we come back, when the narrows are stacked on top of the wides, so the next thing I'm doing up here is a narrow, I have to shift back up. So basically, when you're descending, you always shift down on the 3rd string, and then when you're going from the wides to the narrows, descending, you shift back up when the narrows are stacked on top of the wides. So again, shift down on the 3rd string, and then when you're going from wides to narrows, shift up. Those are the only shifts you'll ever see in any of these scales. So here, if I put my pinky on this, I have 2 wides, pinky on the root, 2 wides, shift down on the 3rd string, then shift back up to go to the narrows. The narrows are stacked on top of the wides there. When I'm going the other way, so I have my wides here, is my pinky on the root note. When I'm going the other way, there is no shift when I go to the narrows. You only shift when the narrows are stacked on top of the wides. In this case, right here, I have the wides kind of stacked on top of the narrows. The narrow would be down below. So here's my wides. Stay in the same position. Do not shift to go back to narrows when you're going that direction, when the wides are stacked on top of the narrows. That works everywhere. So if we put our pointer finger here, for example, we put 3 narrows, shift down on the 3rd string, and then when the wides are stacked on top of the narrows, we do not shift. So we stay in the same place there. Here's the pointer finger on the 2nd string A, shift down on the 3rd string, then stay in the same position for the wides. As we go up, here's our 2 wides, here's our 3 narrows with that shift between the 2nd and 3rd string. Then I need to do that shift because the narrows are stacked on top of the wides at that point. Here's the narrows. As I go up to the wides, I need to shift. So the way these shifts work is when you go between the 2nd and 3rd string, when you're descending, you shift down, and when you're ascending, you shift up. You always have that skew of 1 fret like that between the 3rd string and the 2nd string. They're always pulled apart, 1 fret like that. So descending, you shift down between the 2nd and 3rd string, and ascending, you shift up. When you're doing the shift between the wides and the narrows, when you're going down, you shift up, and when you're going up, you shift down. So there's always a skew again of just 1 fret between wherever the wides and narrows are, when the narrows are stacked on top of the wides. So let's just do this a little bit more by rote. You get an interesting little thing here, which is if you know the 1st position pentatonic, you see we have both those rules kind of come together here. We put the pinky, so again, from the beginning, the way this starts is you find a root note. If you want to play major pentatonic, you put your pinky finger on the root note, and you play 2 wides. Now the rule there is when the narrows are stacked on top of the wides, so we just played some wides, now we're going to play some narrows. You have to shift up. So normally we'd shift up there to get to the narrows, but we're also on the 3rd string at that point, so that means we shift back down. So in this one place, we don't shift at all. We would shift for the wides up, but because we're on the 3rd string, we shift back down. So we get this scale. 2 wides in the same place, 3 narrows, and then we have our wides again. And notice when the wides are stacked on top of the narrows, here's our 3 narrows, we don't shift when going back to the wides. So 2 wides, you would shift up because it's on the 3rd string, shift back down. That keeps it in the same spot. 3 narrows, and then don't shift when going back to wides. If we put your pointer finger on the root note, 3 narrows. Whenever we put our pointer finger on the root note, we play 3 narrows. Shift down on the 2nd string, play our wides right there, then shift back up when going back to narrows. That gives us our 2nd position, if you know the box patterns. So here's our next note. Here's the A on the 1st string. Here's that same A on the 2nd string. Put on the 2nd string, put your pinky on the root note, and play 2 wides. This is for major pentatonic. 2 wides, shift down on the 3rd string, shift back up when going to the narrows. Go back up here. Here's our 3 narrows. Shift for the wide, shift for the 2nd string, and then we stay right there. With the wides on top of the narrows, we stay in the same spot. Back to the narrows. It's always 3 narrows, 2 wides, 3 narrows, 2 wides. We started here on the pinky. And if you notice, in this scale, for example, we started on the pinky on the root note, played down our 2 wides, then we got to the narrows, and just like always, that first note, that pointer finger in the narrows, is the root note again. That's another A. Same thing here. If you do your pinky on the root note, there are 2 wides, then we get to 3 narrows, there's our root note again. That's another A. And as we get back to pinky in the wides, that's our root note again. It always works this way. You can do this with any root note anywhere on the guitar, and you'll get the right pentatonic scale if you play the right order of wides and narrows. You put your pointer finger on the A here, so we play our 3 narrows. When we get back to pinky on the wides, we're in another A. And then we get back to the narrows, and that pointer finger again is on an A. We can start this anywhere, and it works the same way. Here's our pinky on the wides, and we get back to narrows, that's an A. Go back up. Okay, and then you put your pointer finger there on the 2nd string. You have the narrows. Shift down on the 3rd string, 3 narrows in a row. Now your pinky, because the wides there are stacked on top of the narrows, here's our narrows, we have wides next stacked on top of that, your pinky finger ends up on the root again, that's another A, and we do 2 wides. Then, in this case, the narrows are stacked now on top of the wides, so I need to do the shift. There's always that little skew this way. The skew between the 3rd string and the 2nd string skews this way. The skew between the wides and narrows is the opposite direction. So like when you're playing down the scale, you shift down when you're going to between the 2nd, 3rd string, and then when you do the shift between the narrows and wides, you shift the other direction. So in this case, that way. That basically keeps you in the same position all the time. So we have our pointer finger there. There's our 3 narrows, then 2 wides, go back up, 2 wides, 3 narrows, and then back to wides. We have to do the shift because the narrows are stacked on top of the wides there. Okay, do the same thing. Find the A note. So again, it's 5 frets, then 4 frets. Put your pinky there, and we've got 2 wides, pinky on the root note, 2 wides, shift up to get to the narrows. Narrows are stacked on top of the wides there. And we got back to our wides. And notice again, as we go down, pinky on the root note, you shift up, and there's our narrows. First pointer finger is a root note again. That's another A. Okay, so from there, we go to narrows. Normally we wouldn't shift, but we're on the 2nd string, so we need to shift up. Pointer finger there, that puts us in the narrows. Put your pointer finger down there, ring finger patterns, the narrow patterns, 3 of them, and then back to pinky. Got a bad note there on my guitar. That's again a root note A on on the 6th string, back in the wides. The beginning of that wides with the pinky is always a root note. And then after that, here's our 3 narrows. Pointer finger on the root note. So as I go up, normally I would shift down there to go back to the wides. I got that skew between the narrows stacked on top of the wides, but again, because we're on the 2nd string, it shifts back up, and we do 2 wides. We're in the 1st position again, if you're looking at positions. So you have pinky again on the root, and that's where the whole pattern starts over. We're an octave above where we started. So we just did all the pentatonic scales using that one little rotating pattern of 2 wides and 3 narrows. So now, if you want to play minors, what we're going to do is the root notes are in different places. You still have always 2 wides, 3 narrows, 2 wides, but the root notes are in a different place in that pattern. So if you want to play a minor pentatonic, there are 2 places you can find the root note again. Remember, for major, we put your pinky on the root and started with wides, or we put the pointer finger on the root and started with 3 narrows. If you want to play a minor pentatonic scale, you do the same thing, but you put the root note in a different place. You find the root note with your pointer finger, and you're at the beginning of the narrows. So put your pointer finger on the root note, I'm sorry, at the beginning of the wides. Pointer finger there, and play the wides. Okay, so put the pointer finger on that root. To play major, we put the pinky on the root and did the wides. To play minor, we put the pointer finger on the root and play wides. Then we have 3 narrows, and all the other rules apply. So pointer finger on the root note A, and then 3 narrows, and then back to 2 wides. So pointer finger, you're on 2 wides, and then 3 narrows, and then 2 wides, 3 narrows, and so on. If we do that, for example, up here, on the A up here, find the A, that puts you in the 2 wides. You got to shift down here for the 3rd string, and then back up for the narrows. Narrows are stacked on top of wides there. And one thing you'll notice here is that this root note, the A, is now in the middle of the narrows when you're playing minor. That's an A right there. So the other rule for this, aside from finding the pointer finger on the root note and playing 2 wides like we just did, got that bad note there. Pointer finger, you play wide, then you shift up and play narrows. That other rule is that you can put the ring finger on your root note. So for example, let's find this A here on the 2nd string, and what'll happen is you'll find yourself in the middle of the narrows. So basically you have a string above and a string below where you play narrows. So if I find my root note here on the A, I have a narrow, and on the string above I have a narrow, and the string below I have a narrow. And because I'm on the 3rd string there, I need to shift. So putting your root note in the ring finger, so in this case the A is going on the ring finger, I get a string above and I get a string below with all narrows. And then go back to wides, and notice there that my root note again, that A, is in the pointer finger. So the 2 places for minor pentatonic in the rotating pattern is you put your pointer finger on the root note and you have 2 wides. Then you have 3 narrows, and so on. The other place, the other way you can do it is you put your ring finger on the root note and you're in the middle of narrows. Then you have wides and so on. The pattern works the same way, the rotating pattern. So going up the scale, going up the fretboard, here's the A. If I put my ring finger on it, I'm in the middle of the narrows. So I can't go higher than that. I'm missing one of those narrows. If I had another string, I'd have a narrow. So I have the 2 narrows here, and I go to the wides, 2 wides, then back to 3 narrows. If I had another string, that gives me the 5th position. And notice that root note is in the middle of the narrows again. The other way I can do it is put my pointer finger on it, and I'm in the wides. Then 3 narrows, then 2 wides. If I do it up here, here's my ring finger on the root note. I've got narrows on both sides of that string, and then 2 wides. And all the rules for shifting apply. So here's my ring. As I go down to the 3rd string, I need to shift. Then I have 2 wides, and as I go back to narrows, I need to shift up. So I put my pointer finger on the root note. Again, if I put my pointer finger on it, I have 2 wides. Shift on the 3rd string, then shift up for the narrows. So pointer finger on the root. This is minor pentatonic. And then going up from there, here's my 2 wides, pointer finger on the root note. I have another narrow there. That gives us our 3rd position pentatonic. Same thing up here. If I put my ring finger on this, remember we go 5 frets, then we go 4 frets. So ring finger on it, that puts me in the middle of the narrows. So a string above and a string below, wherever that ring finger is. Here's my narrow. If I go up, I have that shifting because of the 3rd string. Then 2 wides, and notice that this pointer finger is on a root note again. And if I go up from there, here's again ring finger on the root note, so I'm in the middle of a little cloud of narrow patterns there. String above, narrow, string below, narrow. Here's my root note. Above, narrow, same string, narrow, and below, narrow. Then I have 2 wides. Go back up, 3 narrows, and then above that I have to shift because my narrows are stacked on top of wide, and I have a wide there. That gives us our 4th position if you're familiar with that. Here I can put my pointer finger on that same note where I just put my ring finger. I'm going to put my pointer finger, 14th fret, and again I've got, if I want to play minor pentatonic, wides right there. Then 3 narrows and so on. Bad note there. And then back to wides. So wides on the root note, pointer finger on the root note, you play wides. Go up and you got narrows. And notice there, my ring finger ends up on a root note again. That's another A. And then if I put my pointer finger back there, I have wides again. So here it is, very briefly. Pointer finger goes on the 1st string, 5 frets above that on the 2nd string, 4 frets above that on the 3rd string, and 3 frets above that on the 1st string. For major pentatonic, if you put your pinky on the root, you play 2 wides, then 3 narrows. If you put your pointer finger on the root note, you play 3 narrows, then 2 wides. Same thing on the 2nd string. Here's major pentatonic, 2 wides, then 3 narrows with my pinky on it. If I put my pointer, 3 narrows, then 2 wides. And that goes either direction. Whenever you play 2 wides, whenever you play 2 wides, you play 3 narrows, either going up or going down. Same thing here. Put my pinky on the root note, 4 frets up from that, 2 wides, 3 narrows. This is for major pentatonic. Or if I put my pointer finger on it, I have 3 narrows there, going to 2 wides, and so on. Cool. So, and then we're back to the root note, 3 frets higher than that. So I can put my pointer finger on it or my pinky finger on it. If I put my pointer finger, 3 narrows for major. And if I put my pinky on it, 2 wides for major. The minor rule is still 2 wides, 3 narrows, 2 wides, 3 narrows. If I put my pointer finger on it, whereas with major we did 3 narrows, for minor, that same root note in the pointer finger you play 2 pinkies. Then 3 narrows, and then 2 wides, then 3 narrows, and so on. Same thing up here. Put my pointer finger on that. Here's my 2 wides, 3 narrows, and so on. Same thing here. 2 wides and 3 narrows, and so on. And same thing here. 2 wides, 3 narrows, and so on. The other rule for minor is you put your ring finger on it, and you're in the middle of a little cloud of narrows. The string above gets a narrow, and the string below gets a narrow, and that same string gets a narrow. So here's my A. There's that string. The string above gets a narrow, the string below gets a narrow, and then 2 wides, 3 narrows, and so on. Same thing here. I can't go a string above, so I've got that string, the string below, then 2 wides, 3 narrows, and so on. So that's how you play all the pentatonics. It's really pretty simple. One more time, I'm going to do it really quickly. You find the root notes like this, 5 frets, then 4 frets, then 3 frets. To play major, you put your pinky in 2 wides, then 3 narrows. You put your pointer, 3 narrows, 2 wides. Same thing here, pinky, 2 wides, and then pointer, 3 narrows. That's major. For minor, you put your pointer, you do 2 wides, 3 narrows. Or you put your ring finger and you have a little cloud of narrows above and below. Put your ring finger on it. So that's how you remember every single possible scale in the pentatonics. All of the other scales are just added notes in the pentatonics. So for example, if you want to do a blues scale, let's do the minor pentatonic right there. I'm going to put the pointer finger on A, so that means I'm going to play 2 wides to get a minor pentatonic, then 3 narrows, and then 2 wides. So the blues note, this is where this stuff really shines, is you can create any scale, and it's always a symmetric pattern. We have the wides here, and the 3 narrows. In the blues scale, here's our 3 narrows, you're always going to see 2 added notes. In the narrows, you have these 3 narrows, wherever you are. Wherever you are. We can do that wherever you are, you have those three narrows. The top narrow, this top narrow here, is going to have an added pinky note. Then you're going to play the next one as normal, and then the bottom narrow is going to have an added middle finger. So here's our three narrows. The way we play the blues scale is we add a note here, pinky note on the top narrow, keep this one the same, and then middle finger note on the last narrow. So the wides have no added notes in the blues. So there's your wides, pointer finger on the A. And that gives us a blues scale. And that's going to be true wherever we start. So if I start, for example, here with my ring finger on an A, a little cloud and narrows surrounding above and below. So there's my three narrows. The top one gets an added blues note. Middle one stays the same, and the last bottom one gets an added middle finger. Now we have our wides. They don't change. Now we got another narrow, so I can add this one here. Well, I can do that everywhere. Here's my A up here. So here's three narrows. Got to shift on the second string. So here's my top narrow. Do the middle one the same and add the middle finger down here. So again, three narrows. Ring finger on the root note. I can do that everywhere. Here's my root note here on the first string, or if I do it here, I don't have another string to do the upper string, so I'm going to do this. The bottom narrow, then nothing on the wides, then I have some more narrows here, so I can go. That works everywhere. One of the great things about learning the rotating technique here is that you get to see that all these notes are the same. So if I play these three narrows here, wherever I play narrows, they're the same notes. If I go, that's the same as doing this in those narrows. Or it's the same as doing that same thing here in these narrows. Or it's the same thing as doing this. So it makes all these fingers make a lot more sense, because you can get the exact same melodies wherever you have three narrows or wherever you have two wides. So if you do, for example, a lick down here, if I do that same lick here in these two wides, or say I do it here even in a different octave, I get the exact same melodies in whatever octaves I'm in. If I have it here, for example, whenever I play a lick in a wide pattern, it's going to sound the exact same as that same set of moves in any other wide pattern. Same thing with the narrows. The narrows and the wides are always the same notes no matter where you are on the fretboard. This helps you really learn the fretboard melodically a lot more easily. Everything makes a lot more sense, even though the fingerings, because of all these shifts that you have between the second and third strings and between the the narrows stacked on top of the wides, the scales all look different, but they're really the same notes. And seeing it this way helps you see how the melodies work in each scale. Makes it easier to vary what you're playing because you know what is the same. Okay, so that was a blues scale. If we want to do, say for example, a Dorian scale, I have this all written out on the one page. Everything in here is written out on a single page that you can download as a PDF or a text file on the link down at the bottom of this video. So here's that same pentatonic scale. I'm putting my pointer finger on an A minor pentatonic. So two wides, then three narrows, and two wides, or more. If you had more strings here, you'd have two wides there. Two wides, three narrows, two wides. So to play Dorian, what you do is you play in the wides, right next to your pinky, we're going to add the ring finger. So one fret away from the pinky in the wides. Here's our wides. Right next to the ring finger, or right next to the pinky, we're going to add that ring finger each time. You'll see this for blues. Use that as added notes here. And it looks like my video is going to run out here at about a half hour, so I'm going to pick that up with a second video.